Hi, this is Larry from IELTS Pro, and I want to say I hope everybody is safe and healthy these days in the pandemic. I've got my pandemic beard going, and today I just want to talk about how to improve your grammar score in IELTS Academic Writing Task 1. So we'll be looking at one of my students' writings today and how to improve some of the sentences that she wrote. They're quite good sentences even before we start. But I think these will be interesting for those of you who are looking for a higher score, like a 7, 8, or a 9 in grammar and overall. So let's go straight to it, okay? Here is my student's writing, I believe. It's here someplace, yes. So this is a graph that we're looking at today. It's a pretty straightforward graph, but I'll just introduce it to you. And if you want, you can pause the graph for a moment of the video to look at it in more detail. But we're looking at the number of overseas visitors to 3 areas of a European country between 1987 and 2007. So as you see, there are 3 areas. This line here, the solid line, is the number of tourists who went to the coast. The bottom line here, the heavy dotted line, is the number of overseas visitors who went to the mountains. And this other line, which kind of snakes up here, is the number who went to the lakes. Now, here's my student's writing, and I have indicated the 2 sentences that we're going to look at in red. So those are the first ones. So let's look at this one here. And actually, I am going to separate it from the other ones. And I'll separate this one too. And we'll look at them later so I can switch into editing mode. So let's look at the first sentence. This is describing the solid line, the number of tourists who went to the coast. So I'm not going to worry about the ideas. I'm just going to look at the grammar and the sentence structure, okay? Despite a brief drop in the number of visitors from just under 40,000 in 1987 to 30,000 in 1992, this figure increased dramatically to 55,000 in 1997 and continued to rise gradually to 70,000 in the final year. So it's a pretty good sentence. In fact, there's nothing really wrong with it. The only thing is, I think it could be even a little bit better. So let's look at the subject of the sentence. Now, the subject of the sentence is this: the number of visitors. And I'll just indicate it in bold. Now, in the second part of the sentence, it says, this figure increased. That's good grammar. This figure is a pronoun, which means the number of visitors. So it's well put together. However, there's a way to write it so that it would be a little bit shorter, a little bit easier to understand, and just nicer overall. So how can we do that? Well, we can move the subject, which is this, the number of visitors, from the first part of the sentence to the second part. And then we don't need the pronoun, this figure. Okay, let's do that now. So we'll get rid of this figure, and we're going to put the number of visitors right here, the subject, in the second part of the sentence, right after the comma. So now we have, despite a brief drop, I have to get rid of this too, from just under 40,000 in 1987 to 30,000 in 1992, the number of visitors increased dramatically to 55,000 and so on. So you see, now it's a lot easier to read because we're not dealing with this pronoun, this figure, and in fact, the sentence would be more attractive to an IELTS examiner. It's easier to read and it flows a lot better. Okay, so the other option you would have would be, instead of despite a brief drop, you could also do this. You could also put despite dropping briefly, which is another option. So both of those ways are good ways of starting a sentence. So when you're doing an IELTS writing, I haven't seen this in many IELTS books, to put the subject after the introductory phrase. For example, if you're starting from something, you might say, starting at, 90 cents, 90 cents per liter, price of gas went up dramatically, or whatever, right? So starting with your first figure and doing the phrase correctly, then putting a nice subject is a really nice way of writing the first sentence to describe a line. Okay? Now we are moving into the second part, the second sentence that I want to look at, which is this one. Well, actually, if you remember, this was before it was back here. Oops. Let me just go into editing mode here. Yeah, we'll bring that back. Yeah, it was like this. So I'll read it. The mountains were visited by roughly 19,000 visitors in the first year. This figure then rose marginally by just 1,000 in 1992, followed by a slight increase to 27,000 in 1997, before falling to 21,000, and then increased steadily. So, when I'm reading this, I'm not feeling comfortable. I'm not liking it. I know something's wrong. I know what's wrong. I'm not sure if you know what's wrong. Maybe you could take a moment to pause and see if you can identify what is not grammatically correct in this sentence. By the way, if you hear anything in the background, that's just my son. We're doing social distancing and all of that stuff, and he's home at school with me, so we're doing homeschool and work at the same time. So if you want to pause the video, have a look at that and try to think, what's wrong with that sentence? Okay, so here we are back and looking at this again. So I'm going to separate it, as I said before. We're going to move it down here. And now let's look at this sentence. Now, what I don't like about this sentence is that it's not in parallel structure, okay? It's very important that you follow parallel structure, which means each part of your sentence or type should be in the same format, okay? Now, we have two main formats that are taught widely in teaching the IELTS, and I'm sure you may be familiar with them. One is like this: the subject plus the verb plus the adverb. The number went up dramatically, right? Or the second one is this: there is a dramatic increase in the number. Okay, but what happens when you have to talk about more than one change? We should keep it in the same grammatical form. And that's what's wrong with this sentence. Let's look at it more closely. So it says the figure, this is your subject, then rose marginally. So that's just like number one, by just 1,000 in 1992, followed by a slight increase. Wait a minute, slight increase, that is like this one, adjective noun. So now the writer has jumped down to format number two. And then before falling, it's jumping back up to the verb style. And then increase steadily is again this one. So as you see, it's jumping back and forth from one sentence structure to the other, and this just does not work. So how can we fix it? Well, we put everything into this or everything into this one. So I've actually already copied it down here, and we're going to do it first. We'll put them all into the subject, verb, adverb format. So this figure then rose marginally by just 1,000 in 1992. Now, we don't want to use followed by when we're doing structure number one. So let's just get rid of that, okay? So I'm going to get rid of that. So then and we want to put the verb first. So let's get rid of, again, this, because we don't need that. And we want to put the slightly over here. Yeah? Okay, slightly, to just before falling to 21,000 in 2002, and then increased. Oh, that also doesn't sound nice, doesn't it? And then, but you have before falling to, and this should be parallel to that. So falling to 21, and then increasing steady, because before falling to 21,000 and before increasing steadily to almost 30,000. So now you have a sentence which is nice and parallel, because all of the verb forms are following this same structure. So if we want to do it in the second way, we need to put there was or there is at the beginning before the adjective and the noun. So you would say in the figure, so instead of this figure then rose marginally, you could say there was a marginal rise in this figure. Okay, so we're going to go like that and take away this. Now, another thing is, when you're using the noun, we don't say by. There's a marginal rise, we'll say a rise of. So that's important too. So notice here we use by after the verb. It rose by just 1,000. But when we use the noun, there was a rise of just 1,000. So that's important too, getting your prepositions right. So of just 1,000 in 1992, followed by, now it sounds nice, a slight increase to 27,000 in 1977. Before, now here we want to put, again, we want to stick with the same sort of structure. So it's going down, but then going back up. So we could put before a dip. You know, a dip is like going down and coming back up. It's like a negative peak, right? So before a dip to 21,000 in 2002. And then again, we have to put it into the adjective verb style. So we put a, because we need the article, because it's going to be adjective noun. A steady increase. Okay, so let's make sure these sentences sound good. This figure then rose marginally by just 1,000 in 1992. Oh, I forgot the past tense. Increased slightly to 21,000 in 1997. Oh, you know what? It still doesn't sound that good, does it? We need and here, because it would be, you know how we have these different ways of putting a list in English. We will say something like A, comma, B, and C. Or we will just say A and B. Or we could say A, comma, B, comma, C, comma, and D when we're doing a list. So there's 4 things here. Let's do it like this. Let's try this one. So A, comma, B, and C. So A is this, it rose marginally. B is increased slightly. Or you know what? The easiest way is to do it is A and B. So we're going to put the and here. So the figure then rose marginally by just 1,000 in 1992 and increased slightly to 27,000 in 1997, before falling to 21,000 in 2002 and then increasing steadily to almost 30,000 in the final year. So that's now a good sentence. And let's look at the second one. There was a marginal rise in this figure of just 1,000 in 1992, followed by a slight increase to 27,000 in 1997, before a dip to 21,000 in 2002, then a steady increase to almost 30,000 in the final year. Wow, that makes me tired. Um, I'll tell you what, another day I'll do another video on using real world language in writing, because this is what I'm very interested in the IELTS, is to get out of this real IELTS style and sort of use a more real world style, which I think is a very interesting way of writing IELTS Task 1s and something that a lot of people don't do. Um, in any case, I hope you enjoyed the class today, and that's all I want to say. I hope you are safe and everybody is trying to make the most of their time. If you are at home or working from home or not working at the moment, you know, it's always a good time to catch up on your studies. If you want to know more about the classes that I offer, just give me an email, and I'm always happy to answer your questions at any time. So have a good day, and it was nice talking to you today. See you next time.